He accused me of cheating, but the real betrayal was yet to come. To get revenge for a crime I never committed, he slept with my very own sister. I was shattered by the ultimate betrayal from the two people I trusted most. I rebuilt my life from the ashes, only to find him months later, a broken, pathetic man, crying on the other side of my locked door. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here. Go ahead and get comfortable. Maybe pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea, because I have a story to share with you today. My name is Eliza, and at 48 years old, I find myself standing in the rubble of a life I thought was indestructible. It all started so long ago, it feels like it happened to a different person. I was 16, a junior at Clearwater Creek High, all awkward limbs and big dreams, when I first met Liam. Our town was small, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. He had just moved there. A quiet transfer student who didn't seem to notice the clicks and noise. He wasn't like the other boys. He wasn't loud or flashy, not the quarterback of the football team. He had this quiet confidence, a steadiness that made you feel safe. I remember the first time I really saw him. He was in the town library, reading an actual book, not for a class, and he had this small, focused smile on his face. He looked up, his eyes locking with mine across the dusty stacks, and that was it. A jolt. Our first date was ridiculously small town. He took me to the county fair. I remember the sticky sweetness of cotton candy on my fingers, the dizzying lights of the Ferris wheel. At the very top, with the whole town spread out beneath us like a blanket of tiny lights, he took my hand. It was the first time. And his hand was warm and strong. For the first time, I felt like I was home. From that day on, it was just Eliza and Liam. We were a single entity. We went to prom together. I still have the faded picture of him looking so handsome and nervous in his rented tuxedo, the boutonniere I picked out slightly askew. We carved our initials into the old oak tree by Miller's Pond. We were best friends before we were anything else. We'd spend hours just driving around in his beat-up pickup truck, the windows down and the radio playing, talking about everything. I told him how I wanted to be an editor, to work in digital publishing and create beautiful worlds with words. He wanted to take over his father's real estate brokerage, to build a sturdy, reliable business that gave people a place to belong. We were different, but we fit. He was the anchor, and I was the sail. Our friends all said the same thing. If you two ever break up, I'll give up on love entirely. We were their proof that the fairy tale was real. We went to the same state college, a whole 2 hours away, a huge adventure for us. We got married a year after graduation, a simple ceremony in the little white church on Main Street, surrounded by friends and family. We bought a small starter house, a fixer-upper that we poured our hearts and weekends into. I remember arguing playfully over paint swatches in the hardware store. He wanted beige. I wanted anything but beige. He patiently taught me how to properly spackle a wall, his hand over mine. We planted a garden, and I, with my notorious black thumb, managed to kill almost everything except for a single, stubborn rosebush that bloomed defiantly in a vibrant red every summer. Those first years of marriage were easy, comfortable. We hosted barbecues where the scent of grilled burgers mixed with the sound of our friends' laughter. We spent holidays with our families, building a life. A sturdy, reliable life. Just like the homes he was learning to sell. We'd talk about having kids, but we always said, one day. We wanted to enjoy being us first. Save up money, get our careers on solid ground. His brokerage was slowly taking off, and I was climbing the ladder at a digital publishing firm. It was the American dream. Scripted and predictable, and I loved every minute of it. Our foundation was built on 15 years of shared history, secrets, and laughter. I believed it was forged in steel. I never imagined it was just glass, waiting for the right stone to be thrown. When you live in a house for a long time, you stop noticing the small imperfections. The tiny crack in the ceiling, the floorboard that creaks by the door, they become part of the background noise of your life. That's what his jealousy was like at first. a background noise I chose to ignore. The first time I felt a real jolt of unease was at a friend's backyard barbecue, maybe 5 or 6 years into our marriage. I was talking to Stephen, an old friend from high school who had just moved back to town. We were laughing, reminiscing about our terrible chemistry teacher, Mr. Henderson. It was completely innocent. Liam was across the yard talking to a group of guys. But I could feel his eyes on me. It was a heavy, watchful gaze that made the back of my neck prickle. Later, on the drive home, the air in the truck was thick with silence. I finally broke it. "Is everything okay? You've been quiet." He kept his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," I pressed. "What's wrong?" He sighed, a long, martyred sound. "It's nothing. It's just you and Stephen. You were practically hanging all over him." I was stunned. "What?" "I was not. We were just catching up. You've known Stephen for as long as I have." "I know," he said. And this was the part that always got me. He'd make it about his feelings, his pain. I don't know. Eliza. It makes me feel like I'm not enough. Like you need attention from other guys to feel good about yourself. And just like that, it was my fault. I was the one who had made him feel bad. I spent the rest of the car ride reassuring him, telling him he was the only one for me, stroking his arm. I was apologizing for something I hadn't even done. I see now it was a pattern. He would create a problem out of thin air, and I would be the one to fix it. It kept happening, in small, insidious ways. He'd ask to see my phone. It started as a joke. "Who are you texting? Your secret lover?" He'd say with a grin. I'd laugh and hand it over. He'd scroll through my messages, and I'd feel that prickle of discomfort, like I was being subtly invaded. But what could I say? If I refused, it would look like I had something to hide. So, I let him look. I let him cross that boundary. Again and again. He disliked it when I had girls' nights with my friends. He wouldn't forbid me from going. He was too smart for that. Instead, he'd lay a guilt trip on me. "Oh, you're going out? Okay. I guess I'll just eat this cold takeout by myself. Have fun." He'd look so sad, like a lost puppy, and my resolve would crumble. More often than not, I'd end up canceling, telling my friends I wasn't feeling well. It was just easier than dealing with his silent, wounded treatment when I got home. I told myself it was because he loved me so much. I told myself his fear of losing me was so great that it sometimes made him irrational. I was his whole world, and he was mine. That's what I believed. I didn't see it for what it was. Control. It wasn't just a crack in our foundation. It was a slow, creeping rot, eating away at the beams that were supposed to be holding us up. I've always loved my work. In a world that often felt chaotic, my job was a place where I had control, where my creativity and hard work paid off in tangible ways. I was an editor at a mid-sized digital publishing firm. And for 15 years, I had been a loyal, dedicated employee. I put in the hours, I took on the tough projects, and I genuinely cared about the quality of what we produced. Our content, our website, our newsletters, I treated them like they were my own. So, when my boss, a wonderful, sharp-witted woman named Margaret, announced her retirement, she pulled me into her office. The late afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. She said, her hands folded on her clean desk. "I'm recommending you for my job, editor-in-chief." It was a life-changing opportunity. It meant managing the entire editorial team, shaping the creative vision of the entire company, and frankly, a salary that would finally give us some real financial breathing room. For weeks, I went through a series of grueling interviews, not just with our CEO but with board members. I put together a portfolio and a presentation on my 5-year vision for the site. A presentation I poured my entire soul into. I remember the day the CEO called me into his office to officially offer me the position. I walked out in a daze, clutching the offer letter. I felt a sense of pride so profound it almost brought me to tears. I had earned this. I couldn't wait to tell Liam. I stopped at the fancy grocery store on the way home, the one we usually avoided, and bought 2 beautiful filet mignons and a bottle of champagne we couldn't really afford. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted us to celebrate. When he walked through the door, his tie already loosened from his day at the brokerage, I popped the cork. The sound echoed in our small kitchen. "You are looking at the new editor-in-chief," I announced, beaming. For a moment, he was genuinely happy for me. He lifted me off the ground in a bear hug, laughing. "Eliza, that's incredible. I knew you'd get it. That night was perfect. It felt like a return to the old days. We grilled the steaks, drank the champagne, and he listened. Really listened. As I talked excitedly about my plans for the website relaunch, about my new team, I told him about the new salary, how we could finally replace our ancient furnace, and maybe even take that trip to Italy we'd been dreaming of for our anniversary. "This is for us, Liam," I told him, my hand on his. "This changes everything for us." But the poison of his insecurity was a slow-acting one. The next morning, the celebration was over. I was trying to decide what to wear for my first day in the new role, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Liam was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching me. "You seem different," he said. "I'm just excited," I said, holding up a blue blazer. "No, it's more than that," he said, his voice flat. "It's like, you're already more important." I put the blazer down. "What are you talking about? I'm the same person." "Are you?" he asked. And there it was, that wounded, accusatory tone. "You're going to be a boss now. In charge of all these people. Traveling, going to fancy client dinners. You won't have time for your old life." For me, I was floored. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. My success is our success. That's what a marriage is. "Is it?" he said, looking away, at the floor, at anything but me. "Or is it the beginning of you realizing you don't need me anymore?" I tried to reason with him. I sat down. I explained how this promotion would benefit both of us, how it would make our lives better, how his own success at the brokerage was just as important. But it was like talking to a brick wall. He had already decided what my success meant. It wasn't a victory. It was a betrayal. He wasn't proud of me. He was terrified of me. My new power, my new salary, my new confidence, they didn't make him feel secure. They made him feel small, and his smallness was about to become a very big, very destructive problem. My new role was a whirlwind, but a good one. I inherited a talented team, but they needed direction for the big website relaunch. I spent my first few weeks in back-to-back meetings, trying to get a handle on all the ongoing projects. The person who quickly became my most trusted ally in all of this was David. David was the team's senior project manager. He was in his early 52nds, a calm, steady presence in the sometimes chaotic world of digital publishing. He had been with the company even longer than I had, and knew the business inside and out. I had always liked him on a professional level, but now, working closely with him, I came to deeply respect him. He was smart, he was professional, and he had zero ego. He could have been resentful that I, someone younger with less seniority, had gotten the promotion over him, but he wasn't. He was supportive from day one. I remember one particularly stressful afternoon. We had just gotten some difficult feedback from our biggest advertiser about the relaunch mock-ups, and my team was discouraged. I called a quick brainstorming session to try and turn things around. The room was tense. No one was talking. Then David, in his quiet way, spoke up. "What if we're looking at this from the wrong angle?" he said. And he proceeded to lay out a brilliant alternative strategy that was so simple and so smart, it instantly broke the tension and re-energized the entire room. After the meeting, he stopped by my new office. "Good job in there," he said. "You handled that well." "I didn't do anything," I said. "You saved the day." He just smiled. "You gave us the space to figure it out. That's what a good editor-in-chief does." He then started telling me a funny story about his youngest daughter, who was a freshman in college and was struggling with her own chemistry class. I told her to just find the smartest kid in class and offer to buy them pizza for tutoring. He chuckled. Worked for me. It was a simple, friendly conversation, the kind of chat colleagues have every day. I went home that evening feeling a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of partnership with my new team. I made the mistake of sharing this feeling with Liam. It was a tough day, but we pulled it out. I told him over dinner. David was a huge help. He's just so good at seeing the big picture. Liam put his fork down. David again, he said, his voice flat. You two seem to be spending a lot of time together. He's the senior project manager. Liam. Of course we're spending time together. We're running the biggest relaunch in the company's history. So, you have to be alone in your office with him? Laughing? I was baffled. How do you know we were laughing? I don't know, he said, shrugging, but his eyes were hard. I'm just guessing. That's what you do with him, right? You laugh at his jokes. You tell him he's brilliant. The conversation deteriorated from there. It was my first glimpse into the twisted narrative he was creating. In this story, David wasn't a married, middle-aged professional. He was a homewrecker, and I wasn't a dedicated, hard-working editor. I was an unfaithful wife, eagerly falling for the charms of my work husband. It was insane. It was baseless, but it was the story he was telling himself. And in the months that followed, he would do everything in his power to find evidence to prove that his sick fiction was, in fact, reality. Our house stopped feeling like a home. It became an interrogation room, a stage for a nightly drama I had never auditioned for. The moment I walked through the door, my shoulders would tense up, bracing for the inevitable. The click of the lock was a starting pistol. You're home late, Liam would say from the living room, his voice flat. Not even looking up from the TV. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. The launch metrics meeting ran over. I'd say, the truth feeling flimsy and useless. I'd learned that any other reason, or even just the simple truth, would lead down a rabbit hole of suspicion. Did you work with David today? This was always the second question. Always. At first, I tried to be patient, to be transparent. Yes, Liam. We had a team meeting about the Q4 content strategy. He was there. Just a team meeting? He'd press. You didn't talk to him alone in your office? We spoke for a few minutes afterward about the new budget projections. Yes. About what? Exactly. He'd be watching me now. His eyes narrowed, like a detective trying to catch a suspect in a lie. I would have to recount my workday in excruciating detail. I'd list the topics we discussed. The new wireframes for the site update, the budget for freelance writers, the A/B testing strategy for the homepage. It was humiliating. I was the editor-in-chief of a major digital publication, a respected professional, and I was being forced to justify my every move to my husband like a teenager who had broken curfew. Some nights, I would be too tired to fight. I'd give one-word answers, my voice flat and monotone, hoping my boredom would dissuade him. It never did. It only fueled his suspicion. Why are you being so secretive? What are you hiding? Other nights, I would get angry. This is insane, I'd shout, the frustration boiling over. You are obsessed. Do you go through this with your real estate brokers? Do you ask your office admin to give you a minute-by-minute account of her day? That's different, he'd snarl back. She's not laughing with some man in a closed-door office all day. It was a suffocating, soul-crushing routine. The joy I got from my job, the pride in my promotion, was being systematically drained away, tainted by the dread of the nightly cross-examination. The paranoia began to spill out of our home. One Wednesday afternoon, he showed up at my office unannounced. He just appeared in the doorway of my glass-walled office, a bouquet of cheap gas station flowers in his hand. Surprise, he said with a tight smile. My entire team looked up from their desks in the open plan area, their faces a mixture of confusion and surprise. It was incredibly awkward. I knew he wasn't there to be sweet. He was there to scout. He was there to see David, to assess the threat. to put a face to the name that haunted him. I had no choice but to introduce them. Liam. This is our senior project manager, David. David, this is my husband Liam. David, ever the professional, stood up and shook his hand with a friendly, unsuspecting smile. Nice to finally meet you. Eliza speaks very highly of you and your brokerage. Liam's grip was tight, his smile pure ice. I bet she does, he said, his voice dripping with a meaning that only I could understand. The visit lasted 10 minutes. But the chill it left lasted for days. He had marked his territory. He had invaded my safe space, my sanctuary, and filled it with his poison. After he left, I closed my office door, sank into my chair, and just sat there, my head in my hands, feeling utterly and completely trapped. The prison wasn't just my home anymore. It was my life. The day the world ended, it started with rain. A relentless gray downpour that had started in the morning and showed no signs of letting up. It was a Thursday, the night before our big website relaunch was set to go live. The pressure was immense. I stayed at the office long after everyone else had gone home, fueled by stale coffee and adrenaline, working with the tech team, triple-checking code, and optimizing the final assets. By the time I finally called it a night, it was past 9 p.m. The office building was silent. The only sound the drumming of rain against the tall windows. I was bone-tired. The kind of exhaustion that makes your thoughts feel slow and fuzzy. All I wanted was my bed. I packed up my laptop, gathered my things, and made the long trek down to the deserted parking garage. The air was cool and damp. I clicked the remote to unlock my car, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine started. Thank God. But as I started to pull out of the spot, I felt it. Thump, thump, thump. A sickening, lurching feeling. I got out, my heart sinking, and stared in the dim light, a completely flat tire. Of all the nights, I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let out a long, shaky breath. A wave of frustration so intense it almost made me cry washed over me. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovered over Liam's name. The thought of calling him, of having to explain why I was so late, of seeing the knowing, accusatory look in his eyes when he arrived. It was unbearable. I just couldn't do it. So, I called roadside assistance. The dispatcher was polite but unhelpful. With the storm, ma'am, all our trucks are backed up. It's going to be at least a 2-hour wait, maybe longer. 2 hours. In a cold, dark parking garage. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, resigning myself to the long wait. I was scrolling through my phone when a pair of headlights cut through the gloom, sweeping across my car before pulling to a stop a few spots away. It was David. He had clearly stayed late as well, doing his own final checks on the launch servers. He saw me as he was walking towards the elevator and changed course. He tapped on my window. I rolled it down. Eliza? You're still here? I thought you left hours ago. Flat tire, I said, gesturing tiredly at the dashboard. Just my luck. Are you serious? He said. On a night like this? He looked at the rain, then back at me. You can't wait here. The wait for a tow truck will be forever. Look, my house is only a couple of exits past yours on the freeway. It's no trouble at all for me to drop you off. Please, let me give you a ride. A siren went off in my head. No, don't do it. It's a trap. It will be a fight. He will twist this. But I was so tired. The thought of a warm, dry car instead of this cold metal box was overwhelmingly tempting. It was a simple, kind offer from a colleague. What could be wrong with that? My rational mind pushed the paranoia away. Are you absolutely sure? I asked. I feel terrible taking you out of your way. I insist, he said with a kind smile. It's the least I can do. Come on. I made the decision that would alter the course of my entire life. I grabbed my bags, locked the car, and hurried over to his. The drive was exactly what you would expect. It was 20 minutes of perfectly normal conversation, We talked about how relieved we were that the relaunch was finally ready. He told me he was proud of the work the team had done. I agreed. We talked about the terrible traffic on the interstate. He asked if I had any plans for the weekend. I said, no, probably just catching up on sleep. It was boring. It was mundane. It was completely and totally innocent. As we turned onto my street, I pointed out my house. It's the blue one right there. He pulled into the driveway, the headlights illuminating the front of our house. There you are. Home sweet home, he said. Thank you, David. Seriously, you're a lifesaver, I said, gathering my things. Anytime. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. I got out of the car and turned to give him a final wave of thanks, and that's when I saw it. The living room light was on, and a figure was standing in the window. It was Liam. He was perfectly still. A dark silhouette against the warm light. Just watching. My blood ran cold. The air left my lungs. He had seen the strange car pull into his driveway. He had seen me get out of the passenger side. He had seen me talking to another man. He had seen everything he needed to see, to confirm the twisted story he had already written in his mind. As I walked up the path to my front door, each step felt heavy. Like I was wading through wet cement. I wasn't walking towards my home. I was walking towards the end of my world. The silence inside the house was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that was louder than any screaming match. Liam was standing in the foyer, blocking my path. His arms were crossed, his body rigid. The look on his face wasn't just anger. It was a chilling look of vindication. He looked like he had just won a great victory, like a prosecutor who had finally cornered his suspect. My car? I said, the words feeling flimsy and useless. My voice was a hoarse whisper. It got a flat tire. The tow truck was a 2-hour wait. David offered me a ride home. He let out a single, sharp bark of a laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. David, he said, tasting the name like it was poison. Sir David, to the rescue. How very heroic of him. It was nothing, Liam. It was just a ride, I pleaded, my voice starting to tremble. The injustice of it was suffocating. He was just being a good person. Oh, I'm sure he was. He sneered, his eyes boring into me. Tell me, Eliza. Was this part of the plan? Did you let the air out of your own tire? Did you coordinate with him to make sure you were the last two to leave? You have to tell me. The logistics are just fascinating. You're being insane, I cried, tears of frustration and exhaustion finally welling up in my eyes. I had done nothing wrong. I had just survived the most stressful week of my career. And here I was, being treated like a criminal in my own home. The argument that erupted was volcanic. All the months of suspicion, of accusations, of resentment came pouring out of him in a torrent of hate. He called me a liar, a cheater, a disgrace. I screamed back, my voice raw with pain and fury, defending my honor, defending the simple, boring truth. But it was like trying to reason with a hurricane. He didn't want the truth, he wanted to be right. He needed to be right, because the alternative that his jealousy was baseless and pathological was too much for him to face. You come in here smelling like his car, all smiles after your little ride in the rain, he yelled. What else did you do? Did he kiss you goodnight at the door? I don't know how long we screamed at each other. It felt like hours. Finally, something inside me just broke. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live in this house. With this man. In this nightmare. I'm leaving. I choked out, stumbling back from him. I can't be here tonight. I fled upstairs, his hateful words chasing me down the hall. Yeah, run. Run back to him. Is that where you're going now? I grabbed the old duffel bag from the top of the closet and started throwing things in, not even seeing what I was grabbing. A sweater, a pair of jeans, a toothbrush. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely function. My only thought was escape. My sister Chloe, she was my only family nearby. I fumbled for my phone and dialed her number, my tears blurring the screen. Chloe, I sobbed when she answered. It's me. Can I please come over? Liam and I. It's over. I think it's really over. There was a strange, beat-long pause on her end. It was just long enough to feel odd. Oh. Wow. Eliza. Right now? It's almost 11. Her reaction, the lack of immediate warmth and concern, felt like a tiny paper cut on my already bleeding soul. Please, Chloe, I begged. I have nowhere else to go. I can't stay here. He's lost his mind. Okay, she said, her voice sounding tight, unnatural. Okay, fine. The guest room is ready. Just be careful driving. I didn't have the capacity to analyze her weirdness. I just needed a safe place to land. I ran out of the house, not looking back, and drove to her apartment in a blind daze. When I arrived, I practically fell out of the car and onto her doorstep, expecting her to wrap me in a hug and let me cry on her shoulder. But when she opened the door, she just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself in her robe. She didn't move towards me. Her eyes darted around nervously. Hey, she said. Come on in. The hug she gave me was stiff and brief. It felt obligatory. There was no comfort in it. She showed me to the guest room, pointed out where the towels were, and then said she was tired and was going to bed. She left me standing alone in the cold, unfamiliar room. The door clicking shut behind her. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence of her apartment, and a new kind of dread, a dread I couldn't name, began to creep into my heart. I thought I had run away from the danger. I didn't realize I had just run straight into the heart of it. I didn't sleep. I lay in Chloe's perfectly made guest bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, my mind replaying the fight with Liam on a loop. But underneath the anger and the pain, there was a persistent, nagging feeling of wrongness about Chloe's behavior. Her cool reception, her strange distance. It just didn't make sense. In the morning, I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone as if it were just another ordinary Friday. Morning, she said, not looking up. I sat down at the table across from her. My eyes felt puffy and raw. Chloe, can we talk? I'm kind of busy this morning, Eliza, she said, still focused on her screen. Please, I said, my voice quiet. I really need my sister right now. She finally put her phone down and sighed, an annoyed, put-upon sound. What is it? I started to pour my heart out, telling her about Liam's escalating paranoia, the constant accusations about David, the awful fight, the flat tire. I was looking for sympathy, for validation, for her to say, he's a monster, you need to leave him. Instead, she just listened with a blank, almost bored expression. When I finished, she shrugged. Well, to be fair, Eliza, you do talk about that David guy a lot, she said. I stared at her, dumbfounded. What? He's my colleague. I'm his boss. I know, she said, holding up a hand. I'm just saying. I can kind of see why Liam would be a little insecure. It's a big new job for you. You're always at the office. I felt a cold fury begin to replace my grief. She was defending him. She was taking his side. I stood up from the table. I can't believe you, I said, my voice shaking. I came to you for help, and you're blaming me. I'm not blaming you, she said defensively. I'm just being realistic. I had to get out of there. Her apartment felt even less safe than my own. I'm going home, I said, turning to leave. I'm going to try and talk to him. Maybe suggest counseling. Chloe didn't try to stop me. She just said, yeah. Maybe that's for the best. The drive home was filled with a terrible, growing dread. My sister's betrayal, as small as it seemed then, felt like a dark omen. When I walked into my own house, the silence was heavy. I found Liam in the kitchen, in the exact same spot I'd left him, sitting at the table, staring into space. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Liam, I began, my voice softer than I intended. We need to talk. We can't go on like this. He looked up at me, and his face was a void. All the anger from the night before had been replaced by something much worse. A chilling, hollow emptiness. You're right, he said, his voice flat. We can't. He took a slow breath. I did something last night, Eliza, after you left. I waited, my heart starting to pound in a slow, heavy rhythm. I needed to talk to someone, he said, his eyes fixed on mine. Someone who would understand what I was going through, someone who would take my side. He let the words hang in the air for a beat. So I called Chloe. My blood went cold. You talked to Chloe? Oh, we did more than talk, Eliza, he said, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. It was the most evil expression I had ever seen. She came over. I guess she wasn't too busy for me. We had a few drinks, we talked about you. And then I slept with your sister. In our bed. The words hit me with the force of a physical impact. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The ringing in my ears was so loud I could barely hear him when he stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his face contorting into a mask of righteous fury. You deserve this, he screamed, his voice cracking. Every night. Coming home late. Smelling like another man's car. Whispering about your precious David. You're always with that coworker. You made me a joke. Well, who's laughing now? This is what you get. This is what you get for destroying our marriage. I just stood there, swaying on my feet. The pain was so vast, so absolute, it was almost sublime. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had taken the two most important relationships in my life, my husband and my sister, and he had fused them together into a weapon designed to annihilate me completely. And he had succeeded. In that moment, something inside my soul went quiet. It was like the aftermath of a massive explosion, a ringing silence where all the noise and chaos used to be. The part of me that had spent 30 years loving Liam, making excuses for him, trying to soothe his insecurities, it was just gone, vaporized. In its place was a cold, hard diamond of clarity. I looked at the screaming, contorted man in my kitchen, and I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. He was a pathetic, weak creature, and I was done with him. My voice, when it came out, was so calm, it surprised even me. Pack your bags. He stopped his tirade mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. What did you say? I said. Pack your bags, I repeated, my voice like ice. You have 1 hour to get your things and get out of my house. My house? He sputtered, his bravado crumbling into confusion. This is my house too, Eliza. Not anymore, I said, and I turned and walked up the stairs. I moved like a woman on a mission. I strode into our bedroom, my bedroom, and pulled his 2 large suitcases from the back of the closet. I opened his drawers and started pulling out his clothes, armful after armful, and throwing them into the open bags. T-shirts, socks, sweaters. I didn't fold them. I didn't care. He followed me, his voice a mixture of outrage and panic. Eliza, stop it! This is crazy! We can talk about this. I ignored him. I went to his closet and pulled his suits off their hangers. The suit he wore to my father's funeral. The shirt he wore on our 20th anniversary. They were just pieces of fabric. They meant nothing. I shoved them into the suitcases, zipping them with a grunt of effort. I dragged the heavy bags out of the room and down the stairs, the wheels bumping loudly on each step. It was a deeply satisfying sound. I hauled them to the front door, unlocked it, and shoved them out onto the porch. One of them, overstuffed, burst open, his pathetic belongings spilling onto the welcome mat. I turned to face him. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. He was finally understanding. This wasn't a fight. This was an ending. Get out, I said, my voice dangerously low. I want you out of my sight. I will be calling a divorce lawyer this afternoon. Eliza, please, he whimpered, his anger completely gone now, replaced by a desperate pleading. Don't do this. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash, I said, pointing to the open door. What you did was a declaration of war. And you have lost. Get out. He finally moved, shuffling past me like a beaten dog, not even looking at me. He stepped over his spilled clothes on the porch and walked to his truck. I watched him back out of the driveway, and then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt home, and leaned against it, my body trembling with adrenaline. Then I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Chloe's contact. I needed to complete the amputation. I pressed call. She answered with a sickeningly sweet, "Hey, you." He told me everything, I said, my voice flat and dead, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then silence. You have 5 seconds to say whatever pathetic excuse you've concocted, I continued. Eliza, I am so sorry, she began, her voice a rush of fake tears. I never meant for it to happen. He was just so distraught, and he was saying you were leaving him for another man, and I was just trying to be there for him. Be there for him. I cut her off, my voice dripping with scorn. By sleeping with him in my bed, while I was under your roof? You are a snake, Chloe. A vile, poisonous snake. It's not my fault your marriage was falling apart, she shrieked, her true colors finally showing. You're right, I said calmly. It's not your fault. It was mine. For thinking you were my sister. For thinking you were a person capable of love or loyalty. I am an only child now. I never want to see your face or hear your voice again for the rest of my life. If you ever try to contact me, I will get a restraining order, do you understand? I didn't wait for an answer. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked Liam's. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my phone clutched in my hand, and then, and only then, did I allow myself to cry. It was a storm of grief, not for the man I had lost, but for the 30 years I had wasted on him. The divorce was quick. Liam, to my surprise, didn't fight me on anything. He agreed to let me buy him out of his half of the house. 8 months passed. I threw myself into my work, and the website relaunch was a massive success. David, bless his heart, was the picture of professional discretion. He never asked, never treated me differently. I went to therapy. I painted my bedroom a bright, calming mint green. I started gardening, and that stubborn rosebush thrived under my new care. I was rebuilding. Then, one rainy Tuesday night in October, the doorbell rang. It was Liam. He was drenched, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a shipwreck survivor. He was crying at my door. I kept the chain on. What do you want, Liam? Eliza, please, he sobbed. I saw him. David. A few weeks ago, he was at a restaurant. With his wife. They were just eating, laughing, and he just touched her hand. And I saw it. I saw a man who was happy with his wife. A man who was no threat. And I realized I burned our entire world to the ground to fight a monster I created in my own head. It was never about him. It was always about me. He choked on a sob. And Chloe, it was a nightmare. We tried, but it was built on something so rotten. I hated her for what she did to you. I left her 2 months ago. I'm living in a studio apartment above a mechanic's shop. It haunts me, Eliza. What I did. I'm so sorry. He stood there, dripping and broken. He had finally admitted the truth. But the validation I thought I might feel simply wasn't there. The damage was done. I believe you, I said, my voice quiet. His head jerked up, a desperate hope in his eyes. I believe you're sorry, and I believe you are miserable, and a small, petty part of me is glad. The hope vanished. I spent almost a year rebuilding my life from the wreckage you created. I continued, my voice firm. But I will tell you this. I forgive you. He stared at me speechless. Let me be clear, I said, my voice sharp. This forgiveness has nothing to do with you. It is not for you, it does not absolve you, it does not mean we will ever be friends. This forgiveness is for me. It's a gift I'm giving myself. It's me, walking away from this wreckage and not carrying a single piece of it with me. I'm forgiving you so I can be free. You, on the other hand, will have to carry this for the rest of your life. That is your burden, not mine. I hope you find a way to live with yourself, Liam. And with that, I unlatched the chain, closed the door gently but firmly in his face, and slid the deadbolt home. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the end, the sound of freedom. I walked away from the door, into the warm, quiet heart of my house, my home. I looked out the window at my reflection. A future that was once a terrifying blank void now seemed like a clean, white canvas. It was mine to paint, and I had a feeling it was going to be beautiful.